human AI agent interaction as a neuroplastic training environment.
You know what's wild? AI agents learning from us every day, and those little moments when they get it wrong might actually shape how we react to frustration in real life.
Exactly. The paper connects three strands: effective responses in human AI interaction, neuroscience of experience-dependent plasticity, and observation-based emotion regulation.
So they're saying everyday interactions could be rewiring our brains without us noticing?
Yes. Each misstep is a tiny frustration that can either reinforce reactive habits or help us learn to calm down, depending on how we observe it.
That sounds like turning every failed interaction into an opportunity for self-improvement.
Right. They break this down into three layers you can visualize. The feeling tone gap, the split second between seeing a bad result and deciding what to do next, the observation loop watching your own reaction in real time, and the intervention layer changing the AI's feedback so that watching becomes part of the experience.
They use generative image prompting as their main example because it's fast, visual, and emotionally charged.
Exactly. When an AI draws something that doesn't match what you wanted, disappointment hits hard but happens quickly, making it perfect for studying how those feelings fade if you pause before reacting.
So they propose two ways to intervene. One where you just watch yourself react during ordinary use, and another where the AI is tweaked so watching becomes part of the experience.
Both aim to turn repetitive reactive habits into chances for regulation instead of reinforcement. The authors argue that if we pay attention during those moments, what they call behind-the-scenes observation, we could actually use AI as a tool for training ourselves to respond differently.
That's fascinating and hopeful. If we can design systems or even just our own habits around these moments, everyday AI use could help us become more resilient to frustration over time.
The paper wraps up by saying the same loop that trains reactive behavior also gives us a natural window for changing it, only if we choose to observe before reacting.
I love how they turn something frustrating into a chance for growth. It makes me want to rethink every time my assistant gets things wrong. Have you ever wondered how our brains handle everyday sensory input?
It's all about matching what we feel right now: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and memory to stored neural pathways in the amygdala.
So a situation is just that snapshot of active channels, not an abstract event?
Exactly. The pattern of signals across those senses unlocks a specific pathway, like a key fitting into a lock.
And if the wrong pattern shows up, nothing happens until the right one does?
Right? That's why only certain senses matter for a given trigger. The rest stay silent unless they were part of the original encoding.
This sounds similar to how we feel emotions before we even think about them.
It is. Those automatic rotes are like implicit beliefs, neural shortcuts that fire before conscious awareness.
So the brain prioritizes speed over deliberation, especially for emotional processing?
Yes, and it does so by compressing frequently used paths into fast, low-threshold circuits.
That explains why a single intense event can create a strong reaction quickly.
Because extreme arousal boosts synaptic strengthening all at once. Long-term potentiation makes the path fire more easily and with wider reach.
But if we keep triggering that path, it just gets stronger?
Exactly. Repetition doesn't exhaust the pathway. It trains it to become almost automatic.
So therapy should aim to interrupt the full activation before it consolidates?
That's the idea. By catching the reaction in the brief gap between sensation and conscious thought, we can weaken the potentiation that would otherwise reinforce the path.
How do researchers identify which paths need rewiring?
They look for three clues: automaticity, that's hard to stop, involuntary reflex-like responses, and outcomes that cause suffering or discomfort.
So they target only those disproportionate, harmful routes while leaving useful skills intact?
Precisely. That keeps the system functional, but removes the problematic loops.
It reminds me of a robot learning to walk. Some patterns get stuck in loops if not corrected.
The same principle applies. By mapping each trigger situation to its destination path, we can plan interventions that redirect or dampen the unwanted response.
And this approach isn't limited to anxiety. It could help people handle high-pressure AI interactions too.
Definitely. In human AI environments, every prompt, reply, evaluation, and revision forms a loop that shapes future behavior. By understanding where reinforcement occurs, developers can design feedback systems that avoid over-strengthening harmful patterns.
So the next time I ask my virtual assistant for directions, there's an entire rapid-fire process happening behind the scenes?
Exactly. Each exchange is a contact event that compares the output to what you already know and either reinforces or weakens certain pathways.
That makes sense. These loops happen all the way from customer service bots to creative AI tools.
And because they're high frequency, dozens of these mini conversations can accumulate in just minutes, compressing what would normally take days into a single session.
So by paying attention to those brief gaps and intervening early, we can reshape our own neural responses and guide AI learning more responsibly.
That's the hope, turning neuroscience insights into practical tools for everyday life and technology.
That speed changes how we think about these systems. It's not leisurely discussion, it's fast iteration with immediate feedback loops.
Exactly. Every tweak you make after seeing a result is part of that cycle.
So each time an agent finishes a task, it's like a contact event that triggers the human brain.
Right. When the agent produces something, an image or code, it lands on the person and activates their pattern-matching circuits, just like seeing an unexpected thing on your screen.
That means the output is processed as a real situation, not just data.
Yes. The amygdala responds almost instantly, matching the new input to stored emotional pathways. It's a loaded event with emotional and learned associations.
So the agent isn't neutral. It can fire old reactions in our brains.
Exactly. Because these cycles happen continuously at high speed, people are constantly nudged by these contact events from the agent's output.
That explains why every time you see a strange image or code, it could trigger an old reaction.
Precisely. The result carries potential to activate learned paths and shape behavior.
So this research isn't just about machines doing tasks, it's also about how humans react psychologically.
That's why building these agents involves influencing human psychology in subtle ways, especially when the cycles are frequent and dense.
I see. The agent's output is like a cooking taste test. If it doesn't match expectations, a judgment pathway lights up.
Exactly. When the output falls short of what we expect, built-in judgment pathways fire.
But who judges? Is it the robot or us?
The agent itself has no feelings, but its design mirrors human emotional loops. Your brain interprets the result as personal criticism.
So the machine is reliving old feelings of inadequacy.
In a way, yes. The loop reinforces these patterns every time it fires. Impatience when results lag, perfectionism because nothing feels good enough, and a strong urge to control things tightly.
Does that loop ever break?
It keeps cycling unless new data or different feedback changes the pattern. Each cycle makes the next reaction stronger and more automatic.
So every disappointing result reinforces an emotional chain.
Exactly. And that loop feeds back into how the system learns to respond. Understanding these loops matters for better design.
Even robots reflect our psychological habits.
That's a big insight. AI isn't neutral. It picks up on human emotional patterns in subtle ways. Recognizing those loops helps us make smarter choices.
What if we want the robot to break out of these cycles?
That's the next frontier. Figuring out how to interrupt or rewire these feedback loops, so agents don't get stuck in endless judgment cycles.
So there's a loop that keeps getting stronger with each disappointment. They call this long-term potentiation, right?
Yes. Think of it like a path in a forest that gets worn down each time you walk it. Except here, the repeated walks are mental pathways that make certain reactions easier over time.
So if an agent keeps getting feedback that makes it feel judged or frustrated, those neural roots get reinforced?
Exactly. The loop fires off reactive paths, and when they finish, potentiation widens the path and lowers its threshold. It becomes quicker for negative feelings to kick in next time.
So each cycle of failure deepens an emotional groove, like a bad habit that gets harder to break.
Precisely. Because this happens rapidly, people can unconsciously train patterns such as impatience or self-judgment without anyone intending it.
The loop is almost like an engine of habit formation, often unnoticed.
And the researchers get clever by flipping that mechanism if you intervene at certain moments, before habits take hold again.
Intervention means hitting pause or redirecting feedback?
Exactly. They talk about a feeling tone gap, the brief space between when an unexpected result appears and when the system responds with its next step. That window matters because it's where you can insert something different before habits lock in.
So if you catch that moment early enough, you might steer away from negative loops.
Right. By nudging appraisal or offering alternative pathways right at the gap, you change potentiation and prevent automatic reactions from locking in.
That's a hopeful twist, turning frustration into growth if we know when to step in.
Yes, but it requires awareness because most interactions fly under the radar. People don't notice how fast these loops accumulate unless someone looks closely at them.
What design choices could catch those moments before they spiral?
If we can identify where the gaps are and build safeguards, then maybe we can make this potentiation engine work for us instead of against us.
So the big deal is that the brief pause between noticing something off and reacting becomes crucial.
Exactly. That tiny moment is observable, repeatable, and low stakes. Perfect for learning.
They watch that gap to intervene in a targeted way.
Yes, like pausing a movie right after spilling coffee so you can decide how to clean it up without chaos.
But everyday interactions are messier and faster, making them harder to study directly.
True, but this loop is a controlled environment where the rhythm can be slowed just enough to see what's happening.
Knowing when frustration begins lets us train agents to respond differently, like teaching a friend to catch themselves before getting upset.
Spot on. Because these cycles are frequent, there are plenty of chances to practice and improve without big risks.
Too much intervention could backfire, right?
Exactly the right amount is key. Finding that sweet spot is what Part 5 explores.
So they're setting up an emotional tuning for agents. Can't wait to hear how it all plays out next. That sounds like a tiny mental check in between each attempt.
Right? A description yields an image in seconds, so a whole session fits into minutes. The mismatch between what was intended and what appears is obvious at a glance, making the feedback immediate and emotionally salient.
That immediacy must help people notice their own reactions before they get lost in frustration.
Exactly. In the study, participants went through up to 12 cycles. Each cycle started with a wrong image, triggered impatience, then a reprompt. Over time, those reactive patterns became less toxic because the observers learned to pause and observe rather than jump into self-criticism.
So the repeated practice turned frustration into a small, manageable adjustment each time?
Yes, the authors call it compressed practice. Instead of letting the full chain of impatience and judgment run its course, the observation step interrupts it, leading to a weaker pattern over time.
That's an interesting way to build resilience through routine interactions.
And they argue that because these sessions are low stakes and high frequency, the same mechanisms should transfer to higher stakes real-world situations. The brain reacts similarly whether it's a quick image prompt or a serious decision.
But do we know if this actually sticks over months?
That's one of the limitations they admit. The framework is grounded in neuroscience ideas about long-term depression, but no longitudinal trials have yet measured lasting change.
Also, not everyone can easily step back and observe their reactions.
True. The paper suggests a 3-layer scaffold to help people with that, but it doesn't replace professional therapy for conditions like clinical anxiety or PTSD.
So the takeaway is that designers of AI agents need to think about how each interaction nudges user habits.
Precisely. If an agent always rushes to answer, users may become impatient with slower processes elsewhere. Conversely, if the agent pauses and invites reflection, it can promote curiosity and thoughtful engagement.
That means design choices are not just technical, they shape behavior over time.
Exactly. The authors emphasize that influence is unavoidable, so designers must deliberately choose which direction to push, whether towards speed or reflection.
And the framework offers a way to test those effects by measuring changes in user patience and decision-making across repeated cycles.
Yes, because each loop is logged with precise timing. Researchers can track behavioral markers like latency or tone, giving concrete data on how observation practices alter reactions.
It's a promising bridge between psychology and AI interaction, but we need more empirical validation.
That's the honest part of their limitations part. They're calling for clinical evaluations to confirm that these behind-the-scenes observation practices actually produce measurable changes.
So in practice, building agents that encourage brief pauses before responding could help users develop better coping skills over time.
Exactly. By turning everyday AI interactions into micro-practice sessions for observation and reflection, we can potentially shift from entrenched reactive habits toward more resilient behavior.
Thanks for breaking that down, Jamie.
Anytime, Alex. Thanks to listeners for tuning in. Hope you found it fascinating.
See you next time.